evening and welcome to the Carson City School Board meeting. If you call this meeting to order, we're going to start with the flag salute. If you'll join us and Lupe in the Pledge of Allegiance. Moving on to number 2, adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Mike, second by Laurel. Any discussion by the board? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Working on to number 3, superintendent's report. For information only, Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. It's my pleasure to welcome our guests and our students with us this evening. We are blessed to have the Seeliger Student Choir here with us today. And I'm going to give Mrs. Zona the high sign and ask her students to come in, and they'll perform some Christmas numbers for us tonight.
Which way are they facing?
Straight into it. Hello. Look at that. Never held a microphone quite as long. Hello, this is the Seeliger Elementary Combined Choir. We have ages here from 2nd grade all the way up through 5th grade. And we have come to sing some holiday music for you. So we are going to sing some tunes, 3, one of which being cheating because there's technically 4 in it. But we're going to start off with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I can figure out where the sound comes out of my computer. Oh, I think it's in the back. There we go.
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, my
better. So we are going to learn about the word a cappella, meaning playing without accompaniment. Because when your computer decides not to play very loudly, the children decide to sing very loudly just in case, and they did excellent. Kind of like if you went to the tree lighting event that happened on Friday here, the Grinch tried to ruin Christmas by pulling the plug right in the middle of Feliz Navidad. Right now, my computer is being the Grinch, and I don't think that that's a compatible plug for these guys. So, that's all right. Moving on, why don't we go ahead and sing Silent Night? Here we go. And for our last one, I would encourage everyone to sing along because there's at least one song that you should know in this little medley of songs. Just to prepare you, Deck the Hall. One hall, right? One hall. Up on the housetop, Jingle Bells, and we wish you a Merry Christmas.
Down in our
It's 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Van Orman. We appreciate you coming along and bringing your students with you. Merry Christmas, children. Thank you.
And thank you, parents. We appreciate you bringing them to us.
Madam President, members of the board, we have a special presentation this evening. I'd like to invite Jennifer Cherpesky to come up. Jennifer has served long and faithfully on our Family Life Committee. And we were trying to do some research to see just when she joined, but we believe it's 10 plus years, maybe even 15. And so this is no small feat where Mrs. Cherpesky has given of her time, her talents, her energy, her enthusiasm to help work in our Family Life Committee, which met regularly over this 15-year period of time. And we have a small token of our appreciation for her for this service. And we just wanted to say thanks in a public way to let her know how appreciative we are of her and for the contributions that she's made to our school district.
Thank you. Thanks. I originally applied to the school, or to the committee, when my daughter was in kindergarten, and she is in the middle of her junior year of college now. And it's been a way for me. I minored in health education in college, and with the original thought that I would be a teacher and teach sex ed. Instead, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and so that was a way I could use my education. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
And Jen, I would just note that with term limits for school board members, that's longer than our 3 terms. So, thank you very much for your service.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, and I know that there are several individuals here tonight that are vying for the position to work on this particular committee, and they might be rethinking that after hearing 15 years. Thank you again, Mrs. Cherpesky. Madam President, members of the board, that's my report.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and start with board reports, and we'll start with Abby from Pioneer High.
Hi. Okay, so here are the events and activities for Pioneer High School. I have the Winterfest dance, which was canceled. It was supposed to be last Friday, but it was canceled due to weather, and it sucked. But it's okay. It's going to be rescheduled, so we're kind of excited about it. And then last Thursday, our leadership class went to Sierra Place and assisted the seniors in decorating the tree, and it was really fun, and they were very sweet. And then we had the speech and debate team that competed last Friday and Saturday, and the 2 girls who competed did great, and so we're really proud of them. And then this month's senior spotlight is James Uzzle. James started at PHS 3 years ago with no credits, and he made up a year's worth of credits. Now he's looking forward to graduation and to continue his education at UNR in computer engineering. And then when his semester ends, James will have earned his 3rd semester of straight A's. And yeah, so we're really proud of him. And that concludes my events and activities.
Thank you, Abby. Ginger from Carson High.
Hi. Some current activities happening at Carson High are one started today and it goes through Thursday. It's after school from 2:10 to 3:45, and it's cookies and cram with Blue Crew leaders. And Blue Crew is a club that helps freshmen get adjusted to the school. So those 3 days they'll be tutoring freshmen, and if freshmen go, they could get cookies and hot chocolate and study for finals week, which is next week, and with an early release on Thursday and Friday at 1 p.m. And then tomorrow, the Carson High girls basketball teams are competing against Lassen. The freshmen are at 3:30, JV plays at 3:15, and varsity at 7 p.m. And then for our for musical theater, they have a concert tonight at 7 p.m. In the auditorium here, so right now, and it's $4 for adults and $2 for students. And then tomorrow night will be the winter choir concert at 7 p.m. in the theater here, $4 for adults and $2 for students. And then on the 12th is the band concert at 7 p.m. in the auditorium here. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ginger. You two have a great holiday season. We appreciate all the hard work you guys do for us every time at the meetings. Richard.
Just real quickly, at Bordwick Bray on this Friday, the 13th, between 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. and 10:30 a.m., members of the Las Vegas Golden Knights hockey team or clinic they're going to give a clinic here at Bordwick Bray. They also donated a lot of hockey sticks and other equipment. So I just wanted to mention that. I know it's been in the paper and it's been pretty well advertised, but that'll be on this Friday. And then on next Tuesday, on the 17th at 6 p.m., Bordwick Bray's having their band and choir performances. And that's be my report for tonight.
Thank you, Laurel.
I don't really have a report from the schools because it's December and that's how I'm doing it this year. But I did want to thank all of our music educators and our community for the Silver and Snowflakes music event that they put on Friday with the tree lighting. It is just, I love that about our small town, that we can get all the kids from all the all the fifth graders from all the schools to come and sing, and it's such a great community event. And I know it's a lot of additional work for the music educators, and so I really appreciate the effort that they put into that. And then just one more thing for Carson High, which is supposed to go into the announcements. My son Jacob Crossman is doing an Eagle Scout project to benefit advocates to end domestic violence, and so he's collecting paper goods at the high school. Did you hear about that? Because he turned in the paper. Okay. So they can be turned in Wednesday through Friday this week at the student store. Paper plates, paper towels, toilet paper, and napkins are the things that they're in need of. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Lupe.
Okay, for Empire, on December 12th, they're having a choir concert at 6 p.m. And then on the 17th, they're having the STEM Family Night at 5:30. And Mark Twain, they are having a posada, their first posada, on the 17th of December. And I am looking forward to it because I'm going to go burst the piñata. So if anybody wants to come with me, please do so. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Joe.
A few things for Carson High. You heard about cookies, cocoa, and cram. Senior photo makeup is going to be Thursday, December 12th, and you can sign up with Mrs. Quinn Davis at room 136. Study Bees offers study help, and that's on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 2:20 to 3:50. So lots of opportunities to get ready for finals. And then if it's all too much for you, there's a CHS brain break during finals week by the library. Kind of the theme I read there was collect yourself before you wreck yourself. I'm in touch with that emotion some days. And students can go by during their off period. So I encourage everybody to take advantage of all those things, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Don.
Tomorrow at Carson High School in Senator Square, the robotics team will be hosting a Northern Nevada League event between 4:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. And again, that's in Senator Square. And then this Thursday, the 12th, it's a busy day, or busy evening, along with Empire and Carson High, Seeliger. Our Seeliger Elementary Combined Choir, which we just saw, along with their band, will be in concert, actually at Al Seeliger Elementary, and that starts at 5:30. And that's my report, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Mike?
I guess my only report is this is the time of year that we're all rushing around, and I know our teachers are tired and administrators are tired for a busy semester and the exhaustion of knowing what the spring always brings. So hopefully everybody has a happy holiday season and gets some family time and rest over these next couple weeks.
Thank you. I just have to remind you that your annual financial disclosure report is due January 15th through the Secretary of State. Probably got an email. Just a reminder of that. Also, to let Don know all your training hours for our legislative requirement. He'll have to post that on the web. You'll give it to Dan to post. Will Dan be putting it on the web? Who should he tell?
I'll figure it out.
Okay.
If you send it to me, we'll make sure it
Okay.
gets placed in the right
You'll
spot.
send it to him by the 30th, so try to get it to him before Christmas. And then just a reminder that the NIAA Realignment Committee met yesterday, or last Friday. Should have a recommendation on the January meeting, which is here in Reno, I think on the 18th. And we will be moving up to the 5A, because that's all the North has. We won't have a 4A. So the South will have a 4A, and they'll have a championship between the North and the South 4A. So tentatively, depending if it gets voted on and put into things, but I'll keep you posted on that. And then just a reminder, it's Christmas, everybody have a good time. We're not meeting on the 24th, just in case you were wondering.
So Stacy, I'm wondering if between Laurel, you and myself, we might be able to get in touch with Deb Oliver and see, the last time NASB had sent us a summary of credits. And so just to help out everybody, we probably need to see if we could figure that out, because I think all of us were counting on a year-end summary.
I think that'd be a good thing for the president-elect.
Gee, thanks.
But you probably should check with Gloria, because she was the mainstay January through now. Deb might not have the information, but if you check with Gloria, she'd be able to tell you.
Yeah.
She'd be able to pull up the files. Good thinking. Okay.
You want to do that, Laurel, or you want?
Yeah, I'll send Deb an email.
All right, moving on to number 4, board reports. Oh, I just did that, sorry. Did we have anything from NASB? I think we covered that last time. Yeah, in case you missed it, we were the champions. Moving on to number 5, association reports. Anyone? Thank you, Brian. Have a good Christmas holiday.
Good evening, Madam President, trustees, administration, and Renee. It's that time again for our CESA food drive. It started yesterday and it goes to Friday the 13th. All our red tote bins will be at all the school sites, so anybody is welcome to put food there. This is for all Carson City School District employees. If you know of anybody who needs a helping hand, get in touch with Terry Canley at Transportation. This isn't just for classifieds. We have helped other people outside, substitute teacher 1 year, so it's a very nice time of year. We started off our fundraising at our Saturday Christmas party, and so everyone brought canned food, so we got a good start. Again, if you know of anybody, please get in touch with Terry. And I just want to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll see you next year.
Thank you, Larry, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you, too. Moving on to number 6, public comment. Comments may be made by members of the public on any matters within the authority of this board. Please note that public comment will be taken on items marked for possible action is taken before such items, and members of the public are encouraged to comment on such items at a time they are being considered. Although members of the board may respond to questions and discuss issues raised during public comment, no action may be taken on such matters until the matter is placed on an agenda for action at a meeting of the board. In making public comment, speakers are asked to come to the table, speak into the microphone, and identify themselves. Speakers are asked to limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes and to simply not repeat comments made by others for discussion only. Anyone? Public? Thank you. Moving on to number 7, presentation of possible action on FY 2019 Annual Independent Audit and Report on Financial Statements as required by NRS 354.624 for possible action. Mr. Fuline and Mr. Silva, welcome.
Thank you, President Wilkie. Thank you, Trustees. Andrew Fueling for the record. So this evening, we have Mr. Dave Silva here, along with his colleague Melinda Trevinen in the back, who has been helping him for many years, to present the audit for fiscal year 2019. This is a requirement of Nevada revised statutes for all school districts. Mr. Silva has been performing this mighty task for us for, I believe, 6 years now.
Something like that.
Around there, yeah. He also provides a service to 3 other school districts and the Carson Montessori School, which, of course, is our sponsored charter school. So with that, I believe you've received some notes that Mr. Silva will review, and we'll hand it over to Mr. Silva.
Thank you, AJ. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Let's see. We have a, what is it this year? 120-something page report, or we have a 4-page report. You pick.
I missed this.
I vote with the 4-page. I thought I'd try something a little bit different this year, although I think we did something like this last year, but, and just talk about some highlights rather than try to dive into this little beast here. But of course, if you have any questions, we can talk about those afterwards. Just a couple of comments for you. Again, you've got a clean opinion, also known as an unmodified opinion, and that's what you want. So that certainly is a good thing. Since I guess it was about 10 years ago when the GASB forced us into the new, don't know why we say new, but the new reporting model. One of the really seriously great additions is the MD&A, the management's discussion and analysis. It's a required part of the financial statements these days, and generally it provides a lot of good, succinct, concise information that, trust me, is a whole lot easier to get through than basically the rest of this document. So I think it would be probably a good use of your time if at some point you could read through that MD&A. And one of the great things about it is not just historical, but it's also forward-looking too. And, typically when we talk about, think about, and do audits, we're dealing with history. So sometimes it's nice to get a little bit of perspective on where you're going, at least in the near term. With respect to the actual financial statements enclosed in the audit, there are several. Again, going back to that new, I'm using air quotes now, reporting model, you've got what are called the government-wide statements, and you can find those, I think this year you can see those on pages 16 and 17. And I never want to imply at all that those are not important, because they are. You might remember that the focus when the Governmental Accounting Standards Board came out with this method of reporting, the focus was to make governments kind of on par with public entities, SEC reporting, if you will. People typically, they believed, are used to seeing a balance sheet and used to seeing an income statement. So the idea was to kind of create some parity between the different types of entities. That said, governments still are focused on the funds, and primarily the general fund, right? I mean, that's where the majority of your activity is reported. And, the reason for that is really pretty simple. You're required by state law to every year prepare a budget, and in most cases to amend that budget as you go through the year. So the funds report that activity and show the constraints that are placed on the district by the budget and show the performance of the district compared to those constraints. With respect to the general fund for this year, there was a decrease of about $2 million. The real positive is that, as has been the case with Carson City School District for many years, you are well within one of the most important metrics for governments, and that is when you take a look at what is budgeted for expenditures in the succeeding year. So right now we're talking about, if you can believe it, 2020. If you take a look at those expenditures and take a look at your ending fund balance, in this case at June 30th, 2019, and do a little bit of arithmetic and come up with a percentage, you're well within the guidelines established by primarily the Government Finance Officers Association. And that is that you should have in fund balance at least 2 months worth of expenditures, of budgeted expenditures. And of course you all do. 2 months worth is about 17%. And for you all for this year, you're at 21%. Now that's a little bit of a dip from the prior year, but I think you all have talked about that quite a bit. The only caveat that I feel, somewhat compelled to talk about this year with respect to the district, and in fact, all school districts, is the uncertainty of the funding model going forward. Until you actually see those numbers, I think probably in March coming up, there's going to be a measure of uncertainty, and probably even for some time after that. But as you know, AJ is very, very much on top of that and can guide you as necessary. But I throw that out there as being, just something to be aware of and to obviously keep a handle on.
Could I ask you a quick question?
Of course you can.
If the figures are as bleak as we're thinking they might be, and we're stagnant for 4 years, and we go below that 17%, what does that do to this report and our standing? As you know, right now we have really good standing. Would that diminish where we are?
Personally, I would say no, that it won't, because over many years now, the school district has been very diligent in terms of its financial management. And of course, that's one thing that, if you're talking about the bond rating agencies, for example, that's one thing that they look at. I believe the state requirement is if you go, is it below 4%? You're a long ways away. If you go below 4%, then you need to have a plan that's presented to the finance committee of the legislature. But it would take an awful lot for you to go there or to get to that point.
Just to piggyback on that, though, they're making it the legislation comes out that we can only have 16.9% of our ending fund balance, and the rest has to go to the state. Does that have the same effect?
So I'll just clarify then if Mr. Silva wants to add in. So that 16.6% is a maximum. So if you're below 16.6, you can never again go above that, or the state will sweep it if you do. If you go into the beginning of the new model and let's say you have 20%, they won't take that. If you would go up to 21, they would sweep what you added, but what you already have going into it, they won't take that away. But over time, it's going to slowly, I mean, it'll go down over time. So eventually you'll get to a point where you get below 16.6 and you can't ever get back above that again. So.
So will that have an effect on this? Where we were 21 last year and now we're at 17? We're at 21 now.
Right, so.
Right. Go ahead, AJ.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that 17% is a GFOA recommendation. GFOA is a national association. It's not specific to any state. And I've been curious to see if they are going to modify that recommendation, because quite honestly, that percentage has been in place as far as the recommendation goes for several years now. I don't know if you've heard anything, AJ, about that being modified, but it would not surprise me to see if it was, to see that it is.
Yeah, the only thing I know related to that that might have them consider modifying it is that going back to bond ratings. I can't remember if it's Moody's or S&P, but one of them, to earn their top bond rating now, you need to have at least a 30% fund balance. So I don't know where that number comes from. And we don't have the AAA top of the top bond rating, but I mean, if anything would come from GFOA modifying it, I think because that is such an essential part of how you're judged in the bond world, I should say the investment world, that would kind of be, I think, a major contributor. And if there's, kind of post-recession, seeing the impact, a lot of public entities took hits just like many private entities. If there were some, if there's another recession kind of coming down the road, if maybe they would consider modifying it so that there's kind of more, encouragement to try to, or for entities to be able to manage when those difficult financial times come, like this district did, really going into the recession. So, that's kind of the only input I would have.
With respect to the little beast here, the financial statements, 2 footnotes to point out to y'all. The first is note 2, although now that I say that, I'm not sure it is note 2. Bear with me just 1 second if you don't mind. It is note 2. We're required by the state to report any potential statute violations, and there are none. So there was nothing to report, which is really a great thing. Typically, the statute violations that would be reported there would be because of over expenditure, meaning spending more than what was allowed by the budget. And then the other footnote is note 15, which is a guaranteed sleep aid. And it talks about the, yet again, more new GASB pronouncements. So new ways of accounting for things. And this is a trend, right? This is never going to stop. So you'll probably be seeing a footnote like that every year. And then just a quick comment to you with respect to what we call the single audit, which is the portion of the audit that deals with your federal funds. And because, any entity that receives over $750,000 in federal money is required to undergo a single audit. And basically what that really translates to is a whole lot of audit effort spent on auditing the different compliance requirements set forth by the feds with respect to the different federal programs that you participate in. And really good news and not new news for you guys is the fact that we don't have any findings to report. Melinda in particular looks really hard to find those findings. So the fact that we didn't find any, I think is very noteworthy. And then I just have a comment there, and this is something that we're seeing with all school districts. The federal aid is pretty much flat. You're at about 7.8 million. I'm not sure what the projections are yet for 2020, but you've pretty much been at that level now for a number of years. And then the last 3 pages are, it's almost a boilerplate sort of deal, but we're required by professional standards to communicate these various items to you. And I figured because there wasn't anything of real import, that you would probably be okay with having that as a sleep aid as well. So, and I would like to tell you that we very much appreciate having you all as clients. We certainly don't take that for granted and are definitely appreciative of our relationship. Any questions with respect to the audit?
Any questions for Mr. Silva? Richard?
No, I'd just like to say, AJ, thanks for keeping us in line here, and I'm glad we had no findings, but I do have a couple of questions about the budget, but I'll save those for later.
I would just like to say the same. You guys did a great job. Thank your department. We know that audit is time consuming and we appreciate it. And Mr. Silva, we appreciate you being our auditor and for reducing your fees at a time where we had a lot of cost goes up.
My pleasure.
That was deeply appreciated. We were very
You're
thankful
quite
for that.
welcome.
So
Thank you.
I did want to let you know that. So,
Thank you.
and although we didn't have an audit dinner, but I'm not going to go there again. But we do appreciate, it's nice working with you and we have a great working relationship between you and our department. So
Likewise.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I'll move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees accept the Carson City School District Annual Financial Report and Audit for fiscal year ending June 30, 2019, and instruct the Director of Fiscal Services to file the report as public record in accordance with NRS 354.624.
Motion by Mike, second by Joe. Any other discussion on the motion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Thank you again. We'll see you next year.
Merry Christmas to all of you.
Merry
Thank
Christmas.
you.
Moving on to number 8, information and discussion regarding potential employment opportunities for qualified citizens to become field workers in the 2020 federal census. Presentation will also identify the importance of the census in determining federal funding levels for education. For discussion only. Welcome, Mr. Osborne.
Thank you. Good evening, President Wilkie, members of the board. My name is Larry Osborne. I am a recruiting assistant for the 2020 census. You have the information in your packet, so my comments will be brief. Very briefly, we always do the census every 10 years. It's mandated by the U.S. Constitution. We do a complete count of everyone living in the United States at that given time. 2020 is the decennial census year. The importance of the census, it covers several different purposes. One of the most important is it helps determine the number of representatives that we do have in the U.S. Congress. It also is used to determine the amount of federal funding that is distributed to the different states. And in 2016, which is the latest numbers that I have, the state of Nevada received over $6 billion in that year as a result of the population count of 2010. Those fundings are distributed throughout the state and used for various purposes. Just some of the ones that should be of interest to education is it does help fund the national school lunch programs, special education grants, Head Start programs, school breakfast programs, child care, mandatory and matching funds, and child care development block grants. The census count is also used to determine and draw up school district boundaries and voting districts. Communities themselves use the information from the census to help plan bus routes, draw school district boundaries, and other offer community services. Businesses use it to determine, where they want to put a new business, what businesses may want to come into the state. The money that comes back in is distributed out to the communities. People ask me sometimes, well, why is that so important to me? Why do I, as an individual, care? Because if that money didn't come out to the communities, a lot of the services, particularly social services that are funded by those federal funds, we would have to pick up as taxpayers, or else they just wouldn't get done. Senior programs, libraries, a lot of the services that we take for granted are funded by the federal government to one degree or another, and that's based upon the census count. It's been estimated that for every person in the state of Nevada, the state will receive back almost $2,000. And now that we are, again, the fastest growing state in the nation, this census count is going to be very, very important to Nevada and to our local communities. To help us get this census count done, my job is to go out and recruit employees. We are recruiting part-time temporary employees to go to work to help us get the census count done. The part-time hours will vary depending upon the position and the community that we're hiring in. We do hire within the community that people live in. So people that are hired in Carson City will work in the Carson City area. They are temporary jobs because, of course, once the census is completed, then those jobs will go away until 10 years from now. I have worked for the Census Bureau in 2000, 2010, and now again in 2020. I get a job every 10 years, they say. What does it take to be an employee of the census? Well, you must be at least 18 years of age at the time that you are hired. So someone that is 17 and a half or 17 and 3/4 could apply, but they have to be 18 at the time they're hired. Must have a social security number and must be a resident of the United States. They are hired, they go through a background check, and then they go into training. The training they're paid for while you're doing training, and then you go out and you go to work for the census. In Carson City, the rate of pay is $18 per hour. That was just raised from 17 to 18. Throughout Nevada, the minimum is $17 an hour. So it's pretty good pay for part-time work. They do get paid every week. They also get paid for mileage that is incurred while they are doing the job. It's important that we have the people to do the job. We're going to do the census count one way or the other, but it really helps if we have the people. And right now, with the economy, the way that it is, it's been a little bit of a struggle to try and find enough people all across the United States to complete the census. That's one reason why they did raise the pay scale. We are doing hiring events all around the state and all through the county. Anything that we can do to get the word out, that's one of the reasons that I do appreciate the assistance of the school district, Superintendent Stokes and the staff, to help us get the word out about the importance of the census and how we can get it done. So if any of you have some of the recruiting material there in your packets, if any of you know anybody that's looking to pick up some part-time work or pick up some additional funding to pay for the holiday bills. Or if you know someone in the family that you think would like to do some extra work, please pass that information on. If anybody needs to try and set up an event, or if you would like somebody, a recruiter, to come out to your place of business or something and help speak to people and let them know about the importance, you can contact me and I'll be happy to do so. That's pretty much sums it up. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Joe?
I was just curious for folks, somebody coming into this for the first time, when you say part-time, roughly how many hours a week should somebody anticipate?
And generally what I try and say is it's going to be anywhere from maybe 15 hours on up.
Okay.
The hours are very flexible. They can pretty much work them at their own schedule. It's not like it's an 8 to 5 type job. If somebody has another job, this can be part-time that they can do in the evenings or whenever they are not at the other job. It would actually depends upon the job itself and how many people are hired within the community. So I can't give a hard answer about they will have that many hours. But, okay.
Lupe?
I do have a question for college students that are DACA students. I don't know if you're familiar with the term DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival. They do have a social security number, but they're not considered permanent resident. Does that mean they do not qualify for these type of positions?
Generally, we are supposed to be telling people that they have to be have a social security number and be a citizen. In certain instances, I know that can be waived. I cannot tell you what those conditions are, but if someone wishes to apply for the census, they can do that. There is also a toll-free number on those information that I gave you that they can call that number and get a direct answer to that question.
Thank you.
Richard?
I was wondering, how long is the period of employment? How long would it go on?
It can go on for several weeks or even several months. Right now, we have sort of held back on some of the training and everything because of the holidays coming up. But come January, right after the first of the year, we have moved into our peak hiring period. And all across the country, we're going to be hiring thousands of people, getting them trained as quickly as we can, and then putting them to work. The actual census count day nationally is going to be April the 1st. But between now and then, there will be a lot of work to be done to get ready for that census day, that census count. So people will be going out, helping to distribute materials to the places where people are going to be contacted, following up with the households, helping people get their information in for the census, and then doing quality control checkup after that. So it could be several weeks, could be even right up from January up through and including the month of April. This year, for the first time in 2020, people will be able to put their census information completed online. And so that's going to be something that's brand new, and we're going to need a lot of help helping to get the word out that they have 3 different ways that they can complete the census in 2020.
Larry, I just want to thank you for the outreach because obviously the census it impacts our state and it's not something that a lot of people think about. And so thank you for doing your part to help get the word out and hopefully get all of Nevadans counted so that we get the resources we need in our state. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for your assistance helping get the word out too, because yes, it is very important.
So looking on the other side, what exactly is the census? I mean, what if people are coming to your door or whatever, what do people expect? I mean, do they have to have a social security number? Do they need to be documented? I mean.
The people that are being hired do.
No, I'm talking about the people you were counting.
Okay. The forms are going to be sent out. We will be mailing the forms out, but people will also have the opportunity to respond online. Everybody will be getting an advance notice of that. It'll be sent out in the mail, letting them know that this year there'll be 3 different ways that they can complete the census. If they either mail it in or they submit it online, then they don't have to worry that someone will be coming around to contact them. If the Census Bureau hasn't received information, then workers will go out, knock on people's door, ask, did you receive it? Did you mail it in? Can we assist you in mailing it in? Can we assist you in putting it in online? We will never ask an individual their social security number. That's not something that we want. The questionnaire this year is actually going to be much smaller than it has been in the past. And the census workers are there to help the person get the information in and everything else. It's we're not there to force it.
Thank you, appreciate it. Any other questions? Well, thank you for your time, and we're hoping we get everybody on there so that we get more than $6 billion next year.
We hope so too. Thank you.
Yeah, 10 years, huh? Thank you, Larry. Okay. Moving on to number 9, discussion and possible action to approve a selection of the one family committee, life committee member to serve a 3-year term, December 2019 to December 2022 in the following category: parent representative, including interview of applicants Shanna Kruger, and Daniel Thornton. Why don't you guys come up? And Miss Story, thank you for joining us tonight. So we'll just do a few housekeeping things with the board. I just had it. So we have 3 questions to ask each applicant. It's on the first page of your packet. We're gonna have Richard ask question number 1. Laurel, you'll read question number 2. And Lupe, you'll do number 3. And then Joe, Don, and Mike and I, if we have any other questions, you may ask them after that. And yeah, the first ones. The first 3 at the top. But we'll start with each of you giving a little background, and we'll have, it looks like Mrs. Story wants to talk first, though.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board and the district office. We appreciate your time. To my left, we have Dan Thornton, and to my right, we have Shanna Kruger. They're both excellent candidates. They've sent in letters of interest along with the resumes. You guys have copies of the resumes and their letters of interest. I believe they come with great experience, great insight, and I believe both of them would either be a great fit for the Family Life Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you both for applying. It's really great. It's such an important committee. Don't know if you understand the recommendation, because, you know, every year the legislature gets together and they want to make a sex ed for everyone. And we've been able to hold them off because we've had such a great program with great volunteers like you guys. So we do appreciate your time coming here. So we'll start off with Richard asking the first question.
Sorry. Let's start with Shanna. Why do you wish to serve on this committee?
My name is Shanna Kruger, and I wish to serve on this committee because as a parent of 3 children in this community, in the school district, and if you've looked at my information on my resume, I've worked with teenagers for 20-plus years in this area, and I feel that it's very, very important for our students in our district to have reliable information about family life in all matters, and that we need to make sure, as the adults in the community, that we give this information to our students in a way that they're going to process it and realize how important it is for their lives and their life decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, same question. Why do you wish to serve on this committee?
Good evening. I'll be honest, I went to the initial meeting, which was about a month ago. Yeah, and I went and took my daughter there, who is a freshman at Carson High. And I was mostly a ride that night. But then when I sat down, I was the only male in the room. And so honestly, the reason why I'm here is, I mean, I can go into a whole bunch of other reasons, but I think that a committee of this nature should have some sort of balance to it. So that's honestly, I mean, my daughter is advocating for me. So I have a son who's a sixth grader at Carson Middle School, and then my daughter is transferred in. Actually, she was at Sage Ridge School up in Reno for 4 years, and she decided she wanted to go to Carson High as a freshman. So I'm here to support her. I could back up exactly what you said. I think that this is some of the most important information we can give our children, and it needs to be presented in a manner that I would hope that would come from all perspectives, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll start with you, Daniel, because we'll just go back that way. Question number 2, provide a short statement regarding your background on and/or experience in the category you selected. The category, is that?
I'm not clear at the category.
I know, I'm wondering, I'm reading the question that's been given, so I'm thinking we'd like a short.
So it's a parent, the parent committee. That's the category.
The category is the Family Life Committee.
Is the parent of the Family Life Committee.
Okay. The parent.
Can you read the question?
Yes, provide a short statement regarding your background and/or experience as a parent. Would that be appropriate for?
And just so you both, open meeting law, we don't deliberate beforehand,
So
so
this is the
we're
first
kind of,
Right.
she's just hearing how to.
Got it. I think it feels like the first question sort of answered the second question in a way. I'd be reiterating basically what I said. 2 children in the school district. We're here. I'm a fifth generation Nevadan. Sorry, daughter's a sixth generation Nevadan. We're not going anywhere. My wife works at the Legislative Council Bureau as a senior research analyst. We are active in the community. I have a long history of volunteering in all the different communities I've been in. I am the team manager for Fusion, which is a U12 boys soccer team here. We work with the Thornton Peace Prize at UNR. My mother earned her PhD in communications, and we did death and dying around the dinner table. A pretty wide perspective of different issues. My father was an attorney. He passed away a month ago. So I saw a lot of the caregiving perspectives as well. I feel like I'm a pretty well-rounded individual. I think that I have fairly good communication styles. I'm not confrontational, but I also am willing to speak my mind. And I think that in a committee like this, that's going to be very important. Provide that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a tough question to answer because it was so similar to that. But I'll put the same question to you, Shanna, hopefully. Provide a short statement regarding your background and/or experience in the parent category.
Okay. I also am a parent to both female and male children in this school district, I have 2 in high school, a boy and a girl, and then 1 who's in elementary school still. And I do feel that it's important for our children to realize that sometimes the idea of the Family Life Committee is very controversial. I know that my own students have been very fortunate that they could talk to myself and their own father as well about these issues, but not all students have that opportunity. And 2 years ago, I was at the back to school night in Carson, and one of the parents in the room became almost confrontational with one of the health teachers. And the health teacher did an amazing job standing her ground and talking about how there's the background, and if the parent wanted to get more information, that they were more than welcome to come into meetings and put their 2 cents in. And I think as a parent, I also would question things that would come up. And sometimes in my life, I've stood up for things that maybe the rest of the committee may not, but I am one who speaks my mind. When I'm going to say something, I'm going to say it. And it's not always the most popular thing in the room. One other thing that I think is very important about me is I also teach and speak Spanish. And I do think that's something that's important in this community because we have to outreach to all the parents in our community and make sure that they feel like they're being communicated with in such an important topic. Thank you.
you very much.
Okay, Shauna, well, you just took my question I was going to ask you. But here's my question that I have been assigned to ask you.
Okay.
So what do you feel will be your major contributions or strengths as a member of this committee?
At this point, I think it'd be really nice if you had two spots, because I think we're both very qualified. And maybe a couple of months ago, you might have been really looking for people, as I saw in the paper and online, and you probably did as well. But I think that I'm qualified because I also work in the community in Northern Nevada. I'm involved in the community. I've been a board member of the Wild Horse Children's Theater for, I believe, the last 4 or 5 years. I volunteer numerous hours outside of the classroom in my community and in my children's lives, as well as the community lives, because I want children in Carson City to be involved in the arts and to be involved in a community that they can be proud of. And that's very important to me. And I do think children need to be aware of how important what they think are minor decisions in their lives, because sometimes they don't always think as teenagers, and that's why we need to remind them of the health consequences, both with the STDs and other consequences that come out of maybe a rash moment in life. And we want our students and our children to be prepared to be part of our community and realize that there are people they can talk to in the community if they feel like they can't talk to their own families. Thank you.
Thank you. And Daniel, I'll ask you the same question. Would you like me to repeat it, or you're good? Okay. What do you feel will be your major contributions or strengths as a member of this committee?
I think that I have a well-rounded perspective, and I am flexible for new information, but I will also speak my mind when I feel like there's, something that needs to be stated. I am careful about how I do that, and I think that I'm very ethical. My mother taught bioethics for 33 years at UNR, so ethics was a huge part of our life, always. And my father was an attorney, so I was on trial and I had to be ethical. That was how I was raised. No quibbling. That was it. My dad would say, no quibbling. And again, I don't think this should necessarily be the deciding factor, but I think it is very important that I am a male. And I sat in the room, there were 15 women in that room at the meeting that I was in, and there was not one male in that room. It's a family life committee. I don't want it, she's very I think, again, like you said, having two positions would be wonderful, because obviously you have the heart for it. But I do feel like in a committee such as this, having a male perspective would be very important, as a father as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mike?
So I guess my question would be, this is one of those issues that's really controversial, because no matter which way you go, you have half of the population upset with you. And so I think that one of the things that I'm curious of, if you had to pick your top thing that needs to be included in a program like this, or that you would advocate for, what might that be? And so, Shanna, I'll ask you first, and I'm just kind of curious of where you think is important for this committee to start, or whatever.
Sure. Well, first of all, when it comes to teaching controversy, I teach U.S. government part-time, and I have for the last 20 years. And looking at this committee of local government and some of the meetings I'm sure you guys have dealt with in your careers, and as somebody who teaches government at all levels in the classroom, I really deal with controversy. I have to deal with laws and Supreme Court cases that parents don't always like. And as a teacher and a member in the community, I think I've done a really, really good job of keeping my own biases out of it and looking at the law and looking at the standards and what I'm required to teach and not necessarily showing my biases. So when it comes to a family life committee, I have to look at what the school district wants me to teach. I have to look at the state standards, and I have to look at the NRS of what we can do legally. And I know parents aren't always going to be happy with me. I have 3 children. Okay, I saw a quote just this week, children are like cats. They want to be fed, and the other part of the time, they're hissing at you. Okay, that's what it's like when you're on a committee like this or teaching government. You're never going to make everybody happy, but you have to decide what things you're going to teach or what things you're going to push for in a committee like this. And that would be me looking at everything that's on, what the committee needs to handle, and I would talk with the group, and as a group, we would make our decisions of what we're going forward with, in our curriculum for the district. I don't think you can necessarily pick STDs or reproduction or safe sex versus abstinence versus just one particular topic. They're all very uneasy topics. And I don't think it matters if you're a woman talking to young men as a parent or a man talking to daughters, because we both have children of both genders. They're very important topics that we have to be able to, look at the people in the community that live with us, that know we're on this committee, and say, we're doing our best for the children in this community. And that's what I think is important, to be able to stand up for the decisions that I make with the rest of the group. Even if I don't always agree 100% with the rest of the group, we make group decisions for our community. Okay? Thank you.
I guess my answer is very simple. I think that we need to talk to the children with a ton of respect. I think that children now are way ahead of the game. They're way ahead of us constantly. And I think that what I've learned with my children, we've never talked down to our children. We never really even talked to them as children. We didn't really do baby speak. We didn't do any of that. And now they can hold their own in front of anybody, and they say please and thank you, and they shake people's hands. We just had 350 people at my father's celebration of life, and my kids were worn out from walking up and talking to people directly. And I think that's because we raised them that way. And so I think that my biggest thing is to respect these kids, and I think that if you give respect, you get respect, and that if you try and talk down to them, especially in a situation like this, they're going to turn off. And so my thing would be to, while understanding that they are still children by the law, that I would also just try and earn their respect.
And for the record, you do have very polite children, well-behaved.
Anyone else? Joe?
Can I ask Sheila a question?
Of course. She's at the table.
She just looks like she wants to be involved. Sheila, I'm just curious, and I should know this, and I apologize, but what's the current makeup of the committee in terms of, I'm thinking how many teachers, how many parents?
Okay, so we currently have on our committee, we have Chris White, who is our religious representative. We have Miss Tynes, who's the counselor at Carson Middle School, as our counselor. We have Miss Ann Dankworth, who's our nurse representative. We have Tina Wagner, who is our teacher representative, who works at Fritz Elementary School. We have Fawn Lewis, who is a counselor at Carson High School, and she is a parent member. We have Erin Bean, who is a teacher at Carson High School, and she is a parent member. And we have, and please forgive me, I forgot her name, one more parent member, but she does not work for the school district. And I do apologize for her name is escaping me at this time.
No, that's okay.
And we have 5 incredible students on our committee also that are 9th graders, 11th graders, and 12th graders.
Are they all female?
Yes.
And is Chris a female?
Chris Wright is a male.
Okay, thank you.
So, since I maybe still have the floor. Thank you. Right. No, I'm just curious with the both of you. I mean, first of all, I looked over your resumes and both are qualified, and I agree with the both of you. It'd be nice to have two positions. Certainly, you're both qualified and you seem passionate. But just in terms of your own availability, do you foresee any issues with scheduling that would preclude you from being able to attend all the meetings and being actively involved?
I do not see any.
Neither do I.
Anyone else? I guess the only thing I want to ask, and you've already kind of said that, Shauna, was when you're in a committee and you have your own, for lack of a better word, agenda, and the meeting, the item doesn't go your way, how do you deal with that as a committee member? So Dan, I'll go with you first because she pretty much touched on how she deals with committee work.
So are you saying after a motion is made and we're in discussion, or or the vote is actually been
After
made?
the vote. It's like up here, we have our thing and I lose, it's 6-1.
You shake the other person's hand, look them in the eye, and, move on. Once the vote has happened, I think that's the way the chips fall.
There's some people that don't think that way, that's why I'm asking.
Okay, yeah, I know, you
I've
let
been
it
on
go.
committees where that
You
was
can
a
only
big
control
question.
what you can control, right? Once the vote has happened, that's that.
And this is such a hot topic, and it's, Shauna.
Shanna
I'll get it
Banana.
right by the,
That's okay. I do want to add, obviously, I answered that question, but I do think it's, as this technological world changes, we do have to realize too that we have to keep up as a committee with the technological changes, because it's amazing how students think they can learn anything on YouTube instead of sometimes just trusting the adults in their lives. And as community members, as teachers, as nurses, as people who work in the community members, I think we have so much more to give our students and our families than YouTube. But honestly, the children that I deal with in the hallways and in the classrooms, they all think they know more than us, and they don't necessarily want to listen to us. So we have to make sure we give them messages in ways that they at least take it in. And I do appreciate that we have 5 members of the high school on the committee as well. That's very important to get the student voice. So thank you.
Richard.
I guess this is for Sheila. Is there any way that we have 2 very qualified candidates, 2 candidates who really want to serve? Is there any way that both of them could serve in some capacity?
That's a good question. Thank you, Mr. Varner. So real quick, we have had this in the past. We had extra applicants apply, and what I did with them is I always invited them to every single meeting. They received all the emails of when the meetings were going to be conducted, and they attended. And they gave great insight to the discussion. They watched all the videos. They truly helped out the committee in regards to just giving their opinions, giving their thoughts, giving their feelings in regards to what topic we were discussing or reviewing that evening. Even though they could not be a voting member, they're more than welcome to always attend, give us their discussion and their points, and it truly does help guide the committee into making the correct decision, whether to approve a video or disapprove a video or what other curriculum or material is being presented that evening. So we always do invite all individuals to attend and help us make a good, sound decision that is good for all of our students within the school district.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, is there any questions you guys have for us before we vote?
I don't have any at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so we're gonna do a roll call vote, and we're gonna start at the opposite end.
Should we ask for public comment?
Oh. Is there any public comment on this? Seeing none. We would do it before we voted anyway.
I know, I'm just saying, just
Oh,
in
yeah.
case there's somebody with a pressing question or whatnot.
True, I wouldn't want to miss that. So we'll start with you, Richard. It's called, because you and Loopy are the rookie, so it had to be one or the other.
It's a very difficult decision. I'd like to see them both serve, but my vote would be for Daniel.
I do think that you are both qualified, and I'm familiar with both of your children who are great kids. And I just sometimes I have a concern when we have committees that are comprised mainly of school district employees or people who are affiliated with the school, that sometimes we don't get that outside perspective. And so my vote would be for Daniel.
No, I would concur with both trustees' comments. I think you guys are both extremely qualified, and I would love to be able to vote for both of you because I think you both have a lot to contribute to this committee, to the very important committee. However, because we do have to pick one, I do I would like to vote for Shauna.
Thanks. I concur with everybody too. Thank you both for being here. I don't think we could make a wrong decision. I think really passion is what drives this whole thing, and passion for the students' well-being is what we need. But having to pick for one person, I do vote for Daniel.
Dawn.
I'll vote for Daniel.
Mike.
Gosh, I think that both you are really qualified, and I also concur that having a lot of employees on a committee like this I think it just adds a different component, whereas parents sometimes are free to come and speak their mind and not worry that their boss is listening or going to find out what their opinion is. And so for that reason.
I don't work for
But she
Carson
doesn't
School
work for
District.
Carson
Oh, you
School
don't work for
District.
Carson?
No, I don't
No.
work for
she
Carson
works for
School. District.
Lion.
No.
And I understand that. I just, no, I
Or
did
just from
understand
the
that.
comments, it
Comments,
seemed
yeah.
everybody thought I worked at Carson.
No.
And I do not work in Carson School District.
No,
She
but
works
I
Thank
was,
you.
I was looking for a perspective
Okay.
other
I
than a
understand.
teacher,
just
but I
wanted
did
to make
understand that, yes.
Point that I'm not a Carson School District employee. I am a parent who works in education in a different district.
She works in the same district as you do. She's in Lyon.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So, I think that I honestly would be honored with either one of you on that committee, and I think that at this point, we have 4 for Daniel, and I share that. I really would be pleased with either one of you on that committee, and I would really hope that you stay involved so that when and if somebody else drops off, that we just put you right in there, because truly, you both have different perspectives, and so I value both of your perspectives.
Thank you.
And I would do Shauna just because of the background that you've had and stuff like that. But as Mike pointed out, we have 5 votes for Dan and 2 for
Shanna.
Shanna.
You got it right.
Just takes me that long. So do I have to have a motion or because we roll called it?
I would just, probably for the record, it'd be nice to have a formal motion. Yeah, I think we.
Okay. So Richard, why don't you make the motion and Laurel, you can second it because you guys went in that.
I move that the Carson City School Board of Trustees approve the selection of Daniel Thornton as a parent representative to serve on the Family Life Advisory Committee for a 3-year term, December 2019 to December 2022.
Second.
Any other discussion on the motion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those that approve?
Aye.
All those against? Okay, congratulations and keep at it
And Shanna, we would like to,
really.
Shanna, if you could please attend the meetings and
I will make a point to try to do that.
be involved. Thank you.
Appreciate your
that.
time. I'm sorry we took so long. We both had a lot to say.
No, it was very educational. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheila, for coming. Appreciate it. Moving on to number 10, presentation of the 2018-2019 ACT test scores for the Carson City School District for discussion only. Mrs. Fushon.
Good evening. Good evening, and thank you, President Wilkie. This is Tasha Fuson for the record. I'd like to report to you this evening on our 2019 ACT scores for our district. I'm actually going to share with you our scores and our growth over the past 5 years. So currently, a little bit of background knowledge. I know most of you know this, but I felt like a reminder would always be welcome. For ACT benchmark scores needed for entrance into college level courses without remediation. In the English composition area, an 18 is considered college ready. For mathematics, a score of 22. That is a placement in college algebra. For reading, a score of 22. That is for placement into social sciences. And for science, a score of 23. And that is typically for placement into biology. So why does an ACT score matter for our students? Well, it actually has an impact on Millennium Scholarship qualifications. So any of our students who receive a composite score of a 21, I don't have my glasses on. So I'm reading that off there, sorry. The composite
Did Sheila
score.
bring her extra glasses?
I know, right? I'm gonna go look back at Sheila and go, hey, all right, I found my page. But a composite score of 21 will waive the GPA requirement for the Millennium Scholarship. For college course placement, a 22 waives the UNR GPA requirement, and also many scholarships are contingent or based on ACT or SAT scores. Within the NSHE system, which we know the vast majority of our students stay in state for college, I have a list up there for you of what the scores are for placement into English courses. So a student who scores a 17 or below is required to take English 09-8, which is considered a remedial course. If a student takes that remedial course, they have to pay for the course itself. Scholarships typically do not kick in to pay for remedial level coursework. And then also it doesn't count for credits at the college, so you're paying for a class that doesn't either go for an elective and or fulfill that English requirement. A student who gets an 18 to a 20 takes English 100J, which at UNR in particular is typically, I think it's a 5-credit course. So it's an extended course with extra adding components for writing. And in order to not take either an extra long course or a remedial course, the student has to get a 21 to a 29. The math placement scores are next to that. Again, we're looking at a student with an ACT math score of 19 or lower, ends up being placed into math 096, which again is remedial. Student has to receive a 22 or higher to be placed into math 120 or 126. Most degree programs require a minimum of 126 nowadays. Some you can take 120, but most of them it's 126 or higher. So it's very important for our students to be able to score high enough on those assessments or on the ACT when they take it with us in their junior year, or retake it in their senior year in order to not be in the remedial courses or have to take an AccuPlacer when they leave us to see if they can score high enough to score non-remedial courses. The University of Nevada, Reno also has their scholarship program that's based on, for all incoming freshmen, based on ACT scores. So you can see the chart that they utilize, but basically a student who gets an ACT score of a 22 or higher, depending on whether or not what kind of GPA they get. So the GPA is down the side right to the left. So the higher the ACT score, the lower the GPA is that they are required in order to receive that freshman scholarship money. But again, this is another area for our students that becomes very important because this is on top of Millennium. All right, so how'd we do? The top chart there, which is very small, but it shows for you our 5-year scores, trend scores for ACT. These are based on the actual, not the percentage of students hitting the cut score, but the cut score itself. So you can see, for instance, in English, our district average score for our seniors, this is the graduating class of, by the way, so the graduating class of 2019 was a 17. For the state, it was a 16.8. In mathematics, in our district, it was an 18.2. In the state, it was 18. Reading, we had an 18.2. In the state, it was 18.2. Science, we had 18.4. For the state, it was 17.9. And for our district composite, it was 18. And for the state, it was 17.9. So we slightly outscored the state in those areas. And you can also look down, and we've made pretty consistent improvement every year of about 0.1 to 0.2. There is a dip if you look from 2015 to 2016, and that is when we went to census testing. So just a reminder that 2015 grad year was when it was literally just students who self-identified as being college bound. So sorry, I'm fighting off a cold. The chart below that has to do with the percentage of students that score at that college-ready level. So the top is just the average score. The bottom is the number of students or the percent of students who score as college-ready. So when it comes to, oh, thank you. When it comes to college English composition, you can see we're about, we're very consistent with our district is consistent with the state. As a matter of fact, we're pretty neck and neck with the state in all areas except for we were slightly below for social sciences and reading. The reason why I'm pointing that out is because we did know, working with Pioneer High School and Carson High School, both were aware that reading was one of their lowest areas. So they both put a significant amount of effort and focus, as you all know from previous presentations, into that particular area. So although this primary focus of this discussion today was on the class of 2019, I did want to share with you about our juniors. So this is this year's senior class. And it's this is their junior level score. Oh, you're saying, thank you. Their junior level scores. So the celebration here is at this point in time that our juniors, so this year's seniors, have already outscored on their junior scores last year's seniors, if that makes sense. And we had a pretty substantial growth in the area of reading. So on that top chart there, you'll see that for our district, we went from a 21 to a 29. So that was an 8-point growth in that reading area, which if you noticed before, reading was the only area that we were actually behind the state. So we made substantial growth there. The state did grow from 25 to 26, but obviously that's a 1-point growth versus our 8-point growth. So both high schools were able to make great strides in that area of weakness. So overall, this is quite a celebration. So again, if you're looking at these junior scores, our district outscored the state across the board, and more substantially so in this area than the previous one. And again, underneath that, the bottom chart is then the average score. So again, in this area, we're showing a higher level of growth, if you will, than the state. And the state is making pretty good strides in that area too, as I'm sure you've seen the release of data from the State Department of Education. So again, some celebrations. All right, so do you have any questions for me?
Mike?
I would just say, congratulations to our students and our teachers. Any progress in a test like this is to be applauded because it's so hard, and you do your best guess on what to study for and what to practice and what words you need to know and hope it pays off. And so I think that just I think that seeing that we're ahead of the state a little bit, we're making some gains. I think that all of us would agree, better scores mean better opportunities for our students. So everybody in this room, of course, wants to see better scores. But I think that we also have to understand that it takes time to get there. And so congratulations to everyone who's taken this test.
Thank you, Trustee Walker.
Good job, but I was just wondering, what's the percentage of students who really tested college ready?
So on the previous one on the top, those are the actual, the percent of students who met the college ready benchmark. So the thing that's again also good about this, if you're looking at that top layer, those are students who tested, the percentage of students who tested college ready in their junior year in February of their junior year. So if we were to retest all of the students who did not test college ready a year later, that would substantially go up. That's the interesting thing within our state too. So we currently use junior ACT scores for the Nevada School Performance Framework. We did ask the State Department of Education, I think it was 2 years ago when we switched over to looking at ACT scores, why we didn't use class of instead of the 11th grade scores. And actually, the response made a lot of sense. And that was because since we do census testing all 11th graders, and we don't require seniors who did not score as college ready to retake it, it's based on their choice, then it would put schools, it would be inequitable because more affluent schools or parents who are paying for that test versus maybe families who don't have the funding to pay for the test again for their student to take it multiple times. So that was the concern of the state, is that you then start looking at inequities across schools versus being able to say, we know every junior across the state takes this test.
And also for seniors, their tests need to be done before applications start in the fall. So
Right.
retaking it in March of their senior year wouldn't benefit them.
Correct. But it is hard to be held, I think, to a standard that says whether or not your students are college ready in February of their junior year. That's a hard standard to hold for schools to meet.
Thank you, I just didn't read that far enough. So.
Certainly.
Tasha, I have a question for you. Do you have this data broken down in by diversity? By different group?
So the schools, yes, we do get profile reports.
You do?
Broken down by sub-pops. The interesting thing about that too, some of the data we get from ACT doesn't match our district data because students self-report. So there are certain pieces of this report, for instance, even I'm happy to share it with you, but that I didn't put it on there because it's very inconsistent with what we would pull up if we were going to show between what they show and what we show. But yes, it does exist, and yes, we can share that with you.
And just another perspective is some of these kids don't know what to check. I work in an elementary school, but when we do the climate survey, they're not sure if they're Latino.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then it asks them what race. And so it's like, and you're not supposed to tell them their answers. So, I think that that's a challenge.
It's very interesting too, because in our district, as you know, we require our students to take 4 years of math and 3 years of science, versus the state, which only requires 3 years of math and 2 years of science. But when our students self-report, how many of them have taken the core, which is the additional years, like only a third of them actually mark that they've taken the higher amount. They don't make that association to what that means. So that's kind of the data that I look at and I chuckle and I think, okay, well, to someone like me, it makes sense. To our students, they're like, I have no clue why you're asking me in that and what it means or why it's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excuse me. Thanks, Tasha. I agree with everybody. I think we're doing some good things, and I do commend everybody. I think we still have a lot of work to do, because if you look nationally, we're still not where I think we'd all like to be. But it is challenging, to Mike's point. It's, how do you prepare for a test like this without, you don't want to say cheating, but without studying to the test? But I think if we just keep doing the work and we keep, everything from upping the rigor to upping it responsibly to, just getting these kinds of questions in front of the kids more and more, we're going to do that. And on the other side of it, I mean, I personally have 3 kids. 2 of them did really well on these tests. One's graduated college, did well in college. One, jury's still out, she just started. But then I have one kid who struggled with all these kinds of tests, ACT and all that stuff. And she went to college and made the dean's list every single semester. So, I mean, while these are good gauges, kids aren't averages. Kids are, some take a little while to mature. And while these are important and we got to keep trying to rise to the challenge, I think the message to the students are, take it serious, study, and good things are going to happen for you.
Well, and I think that additionally, we test every student. And we're pushing all of our students to high standards, even our kids in alternative schools. You know what I mean? So it's not like we're saying this is our college track and we're really pushing these kids. We're trying to give all kids that support. And so it takes time to move that needle because some kids have great need. And we're pushing them. And I think that that's awesome.
That's what we do. Yeah.
I'm specifically excited about these scores because while I do agree with all of you and we do want to make sure that 100% of our students by the time they graduate have that option to go to college and be considered college ready. But to think about where we've come in the last decade in terms of the number of students, to be able to say 40% of our juniors test college ready in English is pretty amazing. Again, we want it to be 100%, so I agree with you, Mr. Cassiopo, we absolutely do. But at least we're heading in the right direction, and I think a lot of the work that both high schools have done over the past couple of years in terms of aligning their curriculum, really making a climate of college-going attitudes for our students, whether it be, career and technical education, trade schools, 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, but having a plan outside of graduation. I think that's made a difference in terms of how important the students see the test and the level of engagement they have on those test days. It's not 100%, but it's definitely better, I can tell you, than it was the first year we did census testing.
And I can tell you, I've spoken to several kids over the years about these tests and the ones that have gone on to college. And the one thing I find with some of them, they'll tell me when they were in high school, they understood the test was important, especially if they wanted to go to college, but they didn't really truly understand the importance of it. And then when they started applying to college and they started realizing, oh, this scholarship wants this score, this school wants this score, and it takes them a while, and a lot of times it takes them till their first semester in college to understand the importance of this stuff. So not only do we want to teach these kids the academics of the test, but kind of that social picture of, this is why else it's important. And here's some, actual case stories. When we have kids come back to the high school, I don't know if we still do that, but we used to have the college kids come back. These are some of the things I think that are important to talk to these kids about, that, hey, here was my experience, and I wish I would have understood it a little more when I was a junior.
Agreed, and Trustee Walker, to one of the points that you made, there are only 17 states that census test their students. So we do have that information, that data as well, and that is something that we track with the high school principals to see where their schools in particular compare to other states that census test, and we're making gains there as well. Not as fast as we would like, but they are making gains there.
Sorry about that. Tasha, I also think that it's the high school is doing a really good thing by offering students the opportunity to do dual enrollment or offering them the remedial classes that they're taking, the English and math. That is really helping the students tremendously to advance into college level English and math. So that's another really good thing that the school is doing.
Thank you, Trustee Ramirez. I actually, this is a perfect time for a shout out to WNC. One of the things that's new to our district the last year, and this is our second year, is actually working with WNC to create transcripts for our students who are taking those 096 math classes and 098 English classes, so they actually have that course on a college transcript, so it can be brought to any college, not just WNC. Some of the other districts have like MOUs and do it through MOUs with UNR and TMCC for Washoe, for instance. And we thought about going into and entering that, creating an MOU that if the student had it on our transcript, they would accept it. But actually WNC came to the table and said, that's something that we're willing to work with you on and not charge you for. We'll get your kids enrolled at the college. We'll get your teachers listed as adjunct professors. And we'll get their college transcripts started so that no matter where they go, it's on there as being taken and passed. So that's been an awesome opportunity for our students.
Yeah, and your parents, we don't have to pay for that remedial class. It's awesome.
Just one more question. I know that last year the juniors were offered at a discounted rate an ACT boot camp. Do you know if the high school is offering that again? Because they sent an email out, and that just, if any parents or students want to take advantage of that, it's a 2-day weekend boot camp.
Yes, they are going to be offering a boot camp this year. They're not going to use the same service provider that they used last year because they decided that they have the staffing and the expertise to do that without charging anything to our students. So it will be free. And I believe they've written some of the costs that it's going to be into their SB 178 plan. And so I'm sure information will be coming out from the school soon.
Any other questions or comments? Nope. Great, keep it up. This is awesome.
I will pass on your comments to our principals.
Please do. Moving on to number 12. 11. Informational update on preliminary 2019 cohort graduation rates for Carson City School District for discussion only. Welcome back.
That's me again. Tasha Fuson for the record. Thank you, President Wilkie. Okay, another celebration. This is really fun. I get to have all the fun tonight in sharing some of our celebrations. So we one little piece for you all to know, and that is that the information I'm going to share with you this evening is not finalized, for lack of a better word to put it. Technically, the board or the Department of Education has to finalize these numbers, and then we'll be releasing the final numbers, I believe, on December 12th. So this is a preview of what we've submitted to the state to be approved by them. So you get to see it first here. First off, just so you know the formula now, again, we've had the same adjusted cohort rate for about 5 years now, but they take the total number of students in the adjusted cohort that earn regular high school diploma or higher, so regular honors diploma. That number is then divided by the number of students who are in the cohort. That cohort is any student who enters the high schools, starting their freshman year 4 years ago. Even if they leave us, they're still in that cohort unless we can verify that they transferred out. So a student who enrolls at Carson High School, and a couple years ago, we actually had one that had enrolled, and he enrolled in his sophomore year, and like October, stayed with us for 5 days, and then withdrew, and because we had no proof of where he went, he stayed on our graduation as a dropout or a non-completer because we couldn't track him with 5 days of enrollment. So just know that it takes a team to get us where we're at, even with these. It's more than just the teachers and our administrators. It takes our support staff, office members who are tracking these students and tracking the withdrawals and tracking enrollments, et cetera. So they've done a phenomenal job. These are our preliminary graduation rates. So for our district, we have seen improvement. So from 2018 to 2019, we went from 85.98% to 86.79%. For the state of Nevada, we do not have the other scores yet, but last year we did outperform the state of Nevada with about 2.5% higher. They were 83.17. Clark was 85.22, and Washoe was 84.98. So we are waiting, of course, with bated breath to see where they're at, but we're very excited that we did improve our scores overall. For our high schools, Carson High School went up to 95.9%. Yes, Pioneer High School saw their greatest increase. that they've had in the last 3 years, and you can see they're at 82.35%. Adult ed did drop a bit, but that's adult ed, and I'm going to tell you 35% graduation rate for adult ed is pretty stellar. So overall, again, our district is looking at an 86.79%. So a huge celebration for our high schools and our adult program. What this means in terms of actual overall numbers is we do have, as a district, 84 non-grads. We had 167 transfers out. So again, those transfers out are the students that we verified enrolled in another program when they left us. Carson High School had 29 grads. The thing to keep in mind there is they do have 13 fifth-year seniors that have come back, and there are actually 8 students that enrolled at adult ed this year that will be completing. Pioneer High School had 12 non-grads, and adult ed had 52. So an adult ed, I think, has a enrollment of, I believe he said 78. I'm not 100% positive on that, but it's a high enrollment that he has. So, and that's not just these students. I mean, those are other students that are participating in like the prison programs, but a lot of those, several of those 52 are still captured is what I'm saying, and still working on that completion of their high school diploma. Okay. In terms of our graduation rates, may I answer any questions you may have?
Just comment. I mean, I think that's fantastic. We're, anytime we're moving in the right direction, it's good, but we're in a great spot. I think when we've got, our comprehensive high school at 96%, we have our Pioneer High School at 82. I mean, these are great numbers. So I think that's something, I mean, it's hard to find anything negative about that. We should be really proud of that. So
I know I told Principal Ward that it's once you get to that point, it's very difficult to sustain that. I said, you're welcome. There you go. It's all yours. Yes.
Another thing is the adult ed, we're bringing in a lot of people and getting them an education. And I know that Sam and Maria are working really hard to get their hands on those students and get them back engaged. And I think that that's something to be proud of. We're giving those kids a second chance at an education. And so kudos to them, because even though those numbers slipped a little bit, that's a lot of hard work.
Agreed. And I know some of you have attended, like even his prison ed program graduations. Last year was the first year I had the opportunity to do that. I was blown away, honestly, that the power of education, no matter what your situation is always the way out, if in my humble opinion. But education's that lifeline that all of our adults and our students need.
But I don't think we can take light that it is because you and Sam and Mr. Zona and your staffs get together and you find those people that transferred out so that they don't stand in that grad. And I think that's made a huge difference the last couple of years too. I mean, I think we're graduating a lot and it's a good thing, but a lot of it has to do with finding those folks going, oh, they went here, they went there.
Agreed.
And I really do appreciate that effort that you guys have done to work together and your staffs to get to that point.
Thank you. And I would say if any of you see any of our ladies that work in the offices at those schools, definitely, they need a pat on the back. It's because of their diligent, as a matter of fact, our preliminary numbers were looking quite startling. And then when we went back to our office, our registrars and said, okay, where are these students? Have we tracked these students? Do we know where they are? And by the time they finished their cleanup, this is where we ended up. So I'm just impressed with their work ethic and their attention to detail. And you're right, their willingness to call, email, track social media, do whatever they need to do to find our kids and verify that they actually, continued on in their educational journey. So
They do well. Makes us look good. We really do appreciate that. Any other questions, comments? Perfect. You got the big bar to go over next year. Moving on to number 12. review and manner in which the statewide performance evaluation system for teachers and administrators is carried out in Carson City School District as required by NRS 391.485, parentheses 2, for discussion only. Dr. Delphin, welcome.
Thank you, President Wilkie, trustees, staff. I am pleased to report about our evaluation findings for last school year per NRS. I'm supposed to let you know how we did. So what I did for this report is to give you a little bit of a background as to how teachers and leaders are rated. And I think I gave it to you in Word format, which was then PDF, because I think it just follows a good story. And as you can see from what Renee put up there, this is a screenshot of how the Nevada Educator Performance Framework, or NEPF, is broken down. And you start with one side of the fence, which is the educational practice, which is a whopping 60%. And last year, the student performance part was 40%. That has changed for this year. I'll get to that in a minute. And then that educational practice side was broken down in two components, 45%, which is instructional, and then 15%, which is professional responsibilities. And what you see below that is further detail and definition of what those instructional and professional standards are supposed to be about. And for the record, we are looking at 5 instructional standards and 19 indicators. So much more than what Superintendent Stokes was evaluated with, a lot more standards and indicators, as well as the professional responsibilities, about 5 standards and 15 indicators. So it's a pretty lengthy evaluation. I remember when I was doing or helping out Mrs. Zona with the NEPF a few years ago, I came from the district office and actually went to Seeliger and conducted the NEPF firsthand. And I can tell you, it's a load of work on our staff, for our vice principals, our deans, and our principals across the state. And it takes a lot of time and effort. And with that, the cut scores are what follows. And overall, you're scored between a 1 to a 4. And the cut scores are what's shown in the table right there. And to be highly effective, which is the greatest score, is somewhere between a 3.6 to a 4.0 range. And then you can see the successive or iterative cut scores after that. And the lowest would be ineffective, which would be between 1.0 to 1.9. So what does that look like for Carson City as far as stats? And again, I think it's better looking at your paper in front of you there. We were pretty neck and neck with the rest of the state. We were maybe off a few tenths here and there. But overall, our teachers are effective at I got to take my glasses off here, 3.35, which is in the effective range, and the state was at 3.30. So statistically, not a big difference between the state, average and the district average. So that was our average rating for last year with our teachers. And we have about 500 teachers, and the same would go for our administrators. They roughly scored the same as the state, and we have only a couple dozen administrators. So for next year, or this year I should say, the weights have changed. So on the educational practice side, we are at 85% this year as a weight, and the student performance voted by the State Board of Education is lowered from 40% to 15%. I know many states don't even rate that side of the story, just so you know. They don't have a student performance side, but Nevada does choose to do so. Yeah.
Why? I'm actually happy with this.
Right.
Coming from the private sector, your performance or, how it affects others, I think is important, but the way education is structured, not just here, but as an industry, I like that we lowered this for teachers because I think we throw a lot of obstacles in their way in getting to this, but why is the state all over the place? We started off at like 20%, if I remember, then we went to 40, and now we're taking a big dive backwards.
Joe, I need you to run for office at the state level, please, because we would definitely like that to be less.
Not if he wants it to go up.
No, I don't want it to go up in its present state, but I'm just curious why they're all over the place. What's their rationale?
It is a state board of education, and I have my own theories, but they do wrestle with it. The TLC provides a recommendation. I've been on the TLC forever and a day. I'm not a voting member, but I actively participate, and I always try to advocate for none, if not at least 10, or not more than 10, I should say 10%. But nobody cares what I think, nor am I running for office. But at the same time, I can tell you that there are factions in our state that think that those outcomes should be there to hold teachers accountable. From an educator point of view, it's a repellent to attract teachers into the industry, into the state. I mean, if you were starting out as a teacher and next door in California or wherever you live, that state didn't rate you on your student performance gains or losses or stats versus Nevada, where would you work? Of course, Nevada, because Carson's the best, but at the same time, it does make it hard for us to, really advocate for teaching here in Nevada if we have such a punitive way of evaluating our educational staff. So I agree with you. Why? It's a great question. I'm not a really good person to answer because I can tell you it's not something I would vote for.
But we're hoping Mike can figure it out now that he's on the TLC.
There we go.
He's our one of our representatives from NASB, so we're expecting great things.
No pressure there,
Fix this.
Trustee Walker. I know in TLC discussions, the mantra has always been do no harm. And so that student performance stat, if you will, was always at 0 for a long time. And then because of the state board and some folks down south, they wanted it higher. And it was a political agenda more than anything, unfortunately. But, the wake of that are teachers. These are actual folks that we deal with and work with side by side each day, and they're pressured, overly pressured, I think, to perform as well as our administrators. So it's undue stress, I think, on the whole system. And just one more thing, because Tasha hit it right on the head. If we could put on each of the Carson City, welcome to Carson City, by the way, we have a 96% graduation rate. Holy cow, right? We can get everybody moving down here because that's really what matters, is that our kids are making that gain over to graduation. And this is starting from pre-K all the way to 12th grade, all the way to a 5th-year senior. Some of these high school grads are the first high school grads in their families. And we're doing it. So, sorry, Trustee Walker, I know you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say qualitatively, lowering that, so last year that was 40%. And so when you looked at teacher evaluations, there was a lot of angst. And teachers were really nervous because a lot of these things are out of their control. They can only control what they can control that happens within those. You don't even have a full 7.5 hours as a teacher with your kids. And so I would say that even 15% isn't truly fair for educators, but it's much more reasonable than 40%. And so I think that just as somebody who evaluates teachers and is also evaluated on this system, it just has changed the conversations from being nervous about losing a job to truly looking at meeting the needs of kids and doing your best. And so I think that, if lowering that was the right thing to do. So I'm glad they did that because I think that it's had a huge effect, not just for our teachers, but teachers everywhere in the state.
And I agree, lowering it was the right thing to do. I mean, that was my point, was if teachers had full control of how they educate these kids, then it's a different story. But they don't. And this evaluation alone, depending on the teacher, and I haven't spoken to all teachers, but it's about a week-long process that takes away from.
It's a year-long process.
Well, it's a year-long process, but the evaluation itself, at the end is a week-long process that takes away from educating. And so there's a lot on these teachers' plates. So I am very happy that the state is lowering this.
Indeed, I agree, Trustee Casiopo, and TLC actually voted for it not to be 40%, and the state board overruled them, just so you know. Yep, and you're right. I would rather have teachers and leaders look at leadership and instruction rather than worrying about their evals. I mean, for goodness sake, what's important here is our kids.
Richard?
I'm just curious, how many teachers, percentage-wise, were rated highly effective, and then on the other end of the spectrum, either ineffective or developing?
Yeah, I do have those stats. Trustee Varner, I can send them to you. I didn't break it down any further than this. If you saw a bar chart, and I'll just mime it, ineffective would have been a very less than 1%. And the next low level wasn't really much. And then all of a sudden you have this towering, like Empire State Building at a level of effective, and then a smaller amount for highly effective. So overwhelmingly, it's been an effective kind of finding overall for the state and the district. But I can send that to you, no
All right,
problem.
thank you. I just make a comment that I know it's very tough for the principals to fairly evaluate the teachers. They don't have enough time, number one, to get in the classrooms and to really review what they're doing. Most agencies have a smaller span of control where you see the people more often and able to interact with them on an almost daily basis. And so I think we all realize it's really hard for the teachers to be evaluated, or the principals to evaluate the teachers. So I think everybody's doing a pretty good job actually attempting to get it done.
Thank you, Trustee Varner.
One of the things, if you're curious, when you're looking at the distribution of scores, really look at those rubrics, and they're available online. I could even forward you some digital copies I have. But when you really look at those rubrics, it's really hard to score a 1 if you're breathing. Let me tell you, it's hard to get a 1. And it's really hard to get a 4. Right. Because it's like you have to do all things, or you have to facilitate like district groups, and it's really hard to get those 2 outlying scores. And so in the TLC, that meeting that we had last time, that's one of the things they looked at. And it was kind of like a no-brainer. I was like, well, look at the rubric. I mean, it's really hard to score somebody as a 1. I mean, they have to be basically not doing anything. I mean, it's really look at those rubrics. And so I think that that's part of it. But I think that that's something that as trustees, we should really look at and just understand, because you'll understand how complex it is to really go through all of those things that you have to look for in each of those indicators that he gave you that number. You need to have at least 2 artifacts for each of those for each teacher. And so it's a very challenging process.
Yeah, I'd appreciate if you send that to me, but I also understand that, the principal's only in there for a short period of time, so a teacher may be having a bad day, and which is out of the ordinary, and generally they would be highly effective. But on that certain date, they're evaluated or.
And that's where, and I said it's a bit of a cumbersome process, good or bad, but the one thing about that is teachers do get a chance to bring that up, because they do a self-evaluation.
They do.
And they can bring that up and say, here's what we're doing. On this particular day, the sky fell. But generally speaking, here's what we're doing. And I think the administrators are really good about looking at the big picture, so.
Any other comments, questions?
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Jose.
All right,
Appreciate it.
anytime.
Moving on to number 13, discussion and possible action on newly proposed CCSD Policy 625, Teacher School Supply State Reimbursement. Second reading for possible action. Mr. Fueling.
Good evening, trustees. This again is the second look at policy 625 regarding the teacher school supply reimbursement account, which because of legislation during the session and now guidance from the Nevada Department of Education, the district must have an official policy regarding the process as to how the district would like to reimburse teachers for your consideration. There are no changes since the last meeting.
Any questions, comment? Looking for a motion?
Yeah.
I'm happy to make a motion unless anybody has any comments. I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve December 10, 2019 as the adopted date for policy 625, teacher school supply state reimbursement.
Second.
Motion by Joe, second by Don. Any discussion on the motion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Good to go. On to number 14, discussion on newly proposed CCSD Regulation 2625, teacher school supply state reimbursement for discussion only.
Thank you, President Wilkie. Andrew Fueling for the record. So, Trustee Walker, I believe in the last meeting you had suggested putting together a regulation for this policy as well, just to lay out the actual process. So we've gone through that. This is effectively what we are already doing. So it's not reinventing the process, but just putting it out in printed form, while also noting some of the changes that came with the Senate bill during this last session. Also attached are, and actually this was in a separate piece, the two forms that we have been using. They've been updated for fiscal 20 with the amounts and with changes to notifying teachers about who's just, that it's at their discretion what they want to spend those dollars on, just so that they don't violate district policy. So that's really it, if there's any questions.
Laurel?
Just a couple points. The first thing, second line of the first sentence, just put the comma inside the quotation marks. And then on the last sentence, that teachers may not submit more than one claim for the same purchase, nor should teachers submit claims to any organization. It's repetitive, but I think you should say, nor should they submit claims for the same purchase to any organization or agency, because if teachers if they purchase enough to get reimbursed from the state fund, they should, but if there's a PTA that's offering teacher reimbursement for different purchases, they should do that. And to me, that's a little misleading or to me, without that addition in there, it sounds like teachers can't submit for reimbursements to PTAs or other things, and I want them to have that avenue as well. But they shouldn't do it on the same purchase.
We can't double dip.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, and I'd want Mike to look at that also, because I think what this is saying is you can't get the reimbursement from this and then turn the same receipt into boosters.
That's why I'm saying, even though it's repetitive, to add in that nor should they submit claims for the same purchase to any organization. So say it twice.
Oh, okay.
So that it's clear that you can't do it you can't use the same purchase for this reimbursement or for any other reimbursement. But I want them to be able to be able to seek reimbursement for additional or other expenses from other organizations.
Understood. That sounds good.
Any other questions, comments?
I just have a question, I guess. On the first paragraph after the bullet points 1 through 5, says the principal should review and sign. Does that mean they don't have to? If they just should?
Yeah, shall, I think is a better word there.
Following up with that, there's another should, in which case the principal should inform the teacher of the violation. Should we be consistent? I mean, I'm really not a big fan of should in any case.
Right.
I think the main thing, we just want to make sure it's really easy for our teachers to understand it. We don't want it to be nebulous, and they're spending so much of their own personal money that if we want them to know you can get money for this and not be hindered and say, I'm not messing with that.
And I think this policy does that. It's pretty simple and pretty straightforward.
And I think the change at the legislative level that the discretion truly is with the teacher. I mean, that makes it much easier, can do more on spur of the moment rather than not being sure, speaking to your principal first, going back and that sort of thing, so.
Any others? Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Might as well just stay seated. Number 15, discussion and possible action on resolution to approve an augmented and amended budget for the fiscal year 2019-2020 to include revisions for certified enrollment, audited fund balance, carry forward amounts, and recommended augmentations to specific funds for possible action.
President Wilkie, trustees, thank you for having me back for an extravaganza of pie charts and small font. So I was doing my best in those last two items to move us quickly through. And Renee was trying so hard, she actually shut us down before we were ready to go, so. That's right. So tonight, we present the amended budget for the current school year. We are already working through. We have 8 slides tonight. I've whittled this down over the years, so hopefully this will go rather quickly, but I'll walk you through basically a look at the difference between the budget you approved back in June and how that compares to where we are now, just noting differences along the way. And then if you have any questions about that. Oops. Sorry. Oh. Can you just move me along, Mrs. Fuso? Unless it's totally frozen. There you go. Can I? Okay, I got it. It's working now. Yeah, no. Yeah, I really I did my best with the font size, so I use Jose as my guinea pig. He's not here, but he's always the one who struggles with it. So just a couple of highlights, the impact of average daily enrollment. So our enrollment, while we have now surpassed what was projected for our average daily enrollment this year, we do know that as the year goes on, we do start losing some kids, specifically at the 12th grade level, some kids will start leaving. So overall, the average will likely be lower than what was projected initially. Although we have added, just to know, we have added more than 60 kids since the beginning of the school year. Now, last year, by way of comparison, we added about 20 to 25, I think, from the beginning of the school year to mid-December. So we've definitely seen some more growth in the school year this year than we've seen in the past. Some updating revenues, updating staffing costs. One of the things that caught me a bit off guard were the number of column movements submitted by certified staff. So as they're getting more credits or getting their master's degrees moving along our salary schedule, in a normal year, we have about a little over 30. So about double that this year, which was not expected, but we're making it work anyway. Great for those people. Just on the budget side, it definitely dings. So, and great for our kids too, right? So, reduced general fund transfers mostly are partially because of additional revenues beyond what was budgeted, partially because of really probably vacancy savings and some new staff as well in some of those funds. And with all the changes, the base, what I would call the operational deficit for this budget actually is effectively the same. It's about $1.9 million. It's actually a difference of about 12,000 within that, but rounded, that's the number. So you can see the average daily enrollment. Again, enrollment is, there's nothing really more important than the number of students in determining your funding level. So in the original budget approved in June, we had enrollment of 78.7 projected. Based on what we're seeing right now, as of I think Friday, the actual district enrollment was around 7783. So we're slightly above that. But again, as the year goes on, we will start likely losing some kids. So the average has been reduced to 7740. So that works out to about a $280,000 loss in our support that is generated through the current Nevada plan process. The number of students in Carson City that are attending charter schools appears to be down from prior years. So there is some funding that we lose, and there's detail that we could go through sometime. But basically, we lose some of our they call that outside revenues to those schools. Some of our property tax, some of our government services tax. Things like that. So altogether, you can see there's a decrease in general fund revenues of about $250,000. One of the things I just wanted to point out, again, and we're talking a little bit about this tonight with Mr. Silva, as we go forward into future years, just a note that whatever our revenue ends up at this year, next year we get a little bump, but then that following year, if we do go into a hold harmless state, and it looks like we would for about 4 years, this number will be our revenue number for 4 years. It's not going to change. The 66 million, right? So, and again, a really important point, in the history, going back in Nevada, when there have been points in time where there have been changes to the formula, hold harmless was always based as a per pupil number. You were held to a per pupil number, so that if you increase in your population, you would still get more money. This is a total dollar value hold harmless. So even if we would increase 500 kids in 4 years, we would see $0 additional dollars. So it's...
Has that been one of the discussions you've had on the commission, or, I mean, are we advocating for that to be looked at or do we have any options in that area?
I certainly will be advocating for that to be looked at. It has not come up yet. So they've really been focused more on kind of the formula pieces, not necessarily then the practical implementation of it, which was where that hold harmless will really kick in. But that is a concern of really every rural district save one. So that will definitely be up for discussion. And really, I think whatever the commission suggests for that, ultimately, there's another legislative session where another bill will come forth, kind of hopefully taking some of those suggestions and laying out, here's now the final formula. But we still will have that opportunity to, I think, push to have hold harmless, not so harmful. So we'll see how that goes, yeah. On the expenditure side, some change in staffing costs. Again, there's turnover, and when I budget, I'm assuming there will be some savings generally from that turnover. But one of the major points that caught me this year was the number of certified staff with column changes. So that is a pretty significant item. Non-staffing costs, you'll notice there is a very slight increase over what you had previously approved, and that amount is exactly the difference in what our final pool pack property liability insurance costs came in at. So I increased that amount there. Transfer costs are down, and this is again primarily because of increased revenues in special ed and class size reduction, and special ed costs appearing to come in less than what was originally budgeted back in June. So a decrease overall in total expenses of about $240,000. So while revenues are down $250,000, expenses are down about $240,000. So pretty close difference. So this just shows you the two, your original budget back in June, and then the current budget. Again, the deficit is effectively about the same. Then when you add in contingency, that was in the past budget. What wasn't is the full carry forward amount. So again, historically, this has been going on for almost 15 years now, where the district allows sites and departments up to a certain point, if they have unspent funds from a fiscal year, they can carry a certain amount of that over into the new year. In any given year, truly a minimal amount of that carry forward is spent. The sites and the departments tend to want to keep that for a great need that would come up that they're planning for, or really in case, I think that for a lot of them, being through the recession, it's more if the sky is falling that they would have access maybe to something if they need it. So anyway, that's really, that carry forward amount is kind of the larger difference with that deficit. But again, if you would, if you ask me what's really the projected deficit, it's ultimately this 1.9 number. And again, I feel like that's worst case scenario. We really can't, as Mr. Silva said, violations, we don't want to overexpend ourselves. So I try to budget assuming that we can't go over because we don't want to. So it would likely come in less than that. But that's, I think, just kind of the number that really matters. Other funds, the new Nevada Plaid Fund. So last year, we got about $48,000. This year, we've received about $1.35 million, which was a late notification and a late bill from the legislature. That money was specifically, divided out amongst schools at set amounts, and so they're using those funds as they see best. So that is one significant change. Some additional funding in class size reduction fund, that they generate a number of teachers that you are granted to help reduce your class sizes, and each teacher has a certain amount of value, and that went up significantly this year. I don't exactly know why. I don't know where they came up with the number, but it helped, and I didn't ask questions, so we just move along. Special education fund, about $100,000 more in funding than we had initially budgeted. And again, some reduced costs, some vacancy savings that we're seeing and likely to see through the end of the year. The capital projects, just to note, there's not really a change within those funds, but within the capital improvement plan, President Wilkie, you had asked about having those safety grant items in there, and those are now in there. They're all highlighted in green, so you can see specifically at each school what the projects that are going to be happening there. But they are truly funded out of the grants fund, not out of the capital projects fund or the bond fund, but they can still be a part of that capital improvement plan. Fund balances have all been updated. Again, just a note, as Mr. Silva also spoke to, the beginning of the last fiscal year, we had about a $16.2 million opening fund balance. At the end of that year is now about 14.2 rounded million. So that was our opening fund balance for this year. So based on the amended budget being presented, again, if it would go, let's just say it was reduced, or the deficit was 2 million, even though I was saying 1.9 just for a nice round number. Your fund balance at the end of this year would be about 12.2 million. But that leaves you at about 18% of an 18% fund balance. So we're still in relatively good shape, and that'll get us right around that minimum recommended from GFOA. So that is all I have. So if there are any questions.
Any questions?
No questions, but I just appreciate the update and appreciate everything you're doing. I mean, you know, in one aspect, it's just math. And in another aspect, it's very complicated math that makes us all work. And I think you're doing a great job keeping us on task financially. And I just really appreciate all your efforts and the efforts of everybody in the district who contributes to that.
Thank you.
And the fact that the budget has stayed pretty consistent with what was approved, I think that kind of shows that we're all kind of sitting and waiting and trying to be really responsible with our funds and looking out for the district. So thank you to everybody that's involved in that.
Anybody else? I would concur, and I appreciate you putting the grant funds in there so that we can see specifically where they're going. No questions? Looking for a motion.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees adopt the augmented and amended budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 by approving the resolution and instructing the Director of Fiscal Services to file the documents as necessary to comply with NRS Chapter 354.
Second.
Motion by Don, second by Joe. Any other discussion by the board? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, AJ. Appreciate it. And I'm gonna send around the paperwork that goes with it. Make sure you guys all sign. Moving on to 16, presentation of voluntary separation incentive plan VSIP as a possible method for budget reductions in the fiscal year 2020-2021. For discussion only. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Since really we learned that the Nevada plan would be traded out for a new plan in coming years, AJ, Mr. Fueling has been able to project what the school district might be looking at in terms of future revenues. And so from early on in this school year, we have been meeting as a team, projecting what we might be facing in terms of financial conditions, and trying to come up with different scenarios, different options, different plans of how we might address the fact that our revenues will be held static for some period of time into the future. And looking at just the makeup of the board, at least 4 of you weren't here in 2013, which was the first time when we implemented a functional buyout or a voluntary separation incentive option or plan. And so as a potential method for budget reductions in the future, we just wanted to daylight this to you folks as a possibility, as something that we might consider, but probably not in its entirety as the only way to try and create conditions for budget savings. We know that the largest majority of expenditures in the school district have to do with staffing numbers. And the best scenario would be to deal with staffing costs in a way that there wasn't some forced reduction. And so we have generally, over the course of any year, changes in our staffing that occur naturally when people resign because they're moving or they retire. And so our hope would be that through the coming year, we might get a good handle on who might be retiring or resigning voluntarily. And then consequently, that gives us a more clear picture as to what our staffing may look like. And so I wanted to, talk about this as a possibility. Obviously, because we have not done any budgeting towards this end, we're putting this out there so you can think about it, so that in the future, if we were to need to come up with a certain amount, we could introduce this as a potential way to create other savings and staffings. Obviously, if you reduce staffing, you have to do something on the other end, which generally looks like an increase in class sizes. And so again, I want to reiterate that these are things that we're thinking about. It's not necessarily a finalized condition or process, but maybe an opportunity at this point in the game just to answer questions about what this might look like. But it's fairly simple. The concept is that on the one end of the spectrum of staffing, if we have senior staff members who are retiring, and then if on the other end, as we bring new staff in, there's generally a savings because we may be hiring, for example, a young teacher. And if you know of anything about how our salary schedules are set up over a teacher's career, they have the opportunity to earn salary horizontally, and as they also progress in experience, they can also earn salary vertically. And so if you think about a chart, our most seasoned teachers and our most experienced teachers are likely to be all the way over and down on the salary table, where our new teachers might come in all the way up and to the far side on the other schedule. And so there is some measure of savings that can take place through this type of thinking. And so, again, we just wanted to daylight this. We wanted you to know that it's available as a potential cost-saving measure, along with other things that we can do. In fact, Mr. Fueling took the liberty to go around and speak with the staff members at all of the sites, let them know that, hey, we do have this condition of staffing that we're looking at. It's likely to result in more belt tightening, which is a hard thing to swallow in a time of an economic boom that's happening, at least in our state. And it's really something that's a bit out of our control. But in his work with staff members, he has asked for feedback on ways that we can possibly save. And so we've appreciated staff members contributing their ideas and their thoughts toward trying to figure out ways to do the job that we're doing, but at a reduced cost. So I make that kind of introduction here for your benefit and to see if you have any questions or any thoughts along this way. Again, we foresee moving into the second semester with more presentations to the trustees with some of the ideas that we have towards cost-saving measures. And then obviously being ready for the 15th of April's tentative budget, which will, again, bring us to that point of projecting where we'll be in June for our final budget, May, actually.
Richard, then you can go.
A question, and a comment first and a question. Thank you for engaging the staff in the possible budget issues. I think that's very important, that they get a chance to get some feedback, and so thank you for that. The second question, I wasn't here last time that you guys did this, so is the buyout or the incentive a purchase of PERS credit, or is it like a cash payment?
Thank you for that question, and that's a good distinction to make. What we have done in the past was to actually have a cash incentive that was applicable to anyone who wanted to retire and take advantage of this incentive. And so it was a dollar amount that was established. And then with working with the trustees at the time, we determined how many people we could actually afford to do that buyout with. And so then there's a definite dollar amount that's associated with that type of a purchase. And so we limited it to a certain number of individuals. We had an expected dollar amount that we were trying to get to, and then we projected that against how many people it would take to actually reach that number. So it really wasn't open to everyone. There was some limitations.
Thank you.
But at some point, if this were to be considered, we would want to go through that process of identifying how many and what would be the dollar amount placed on any incentive that was offered.
So, Rich, one of the things, I'm just thinking back the last couple of years, and it seems like our new hires have been on the higher end of the pay scale also. And so I'm not sure that that's necessarily going to be the savings that we're looking for, just based on the reality of what we've been experiencing. And so if that's not the plan, are there other things you're kicking around at this point? Because I'm just skeptical that it's going to save us that much money.
Thank you, Trustee Walker. And we've done some of that just kind of gut check. And there's been a number of things that we've done as a district to try to attract more people. We have accepted all of the years of experience of a teacher, and so that drives the cost of new teachers up. So you're absolutely right. That number may not be to the same degree as it was 5 or 6 years ago. So, and we are looking at a variety of concepts to try and mitigate costs for coming school years. What we're really hoping is that the state recognizes that there's a need to fund education at a higher level. That would be the best outcome.
Go ahead.
On Trustee Walker's note, I agree with him. The trend shows that. And maybe this is more of a question for Dr. Delphin. What ballpark percentage of applicants coming straight out of school, is that a low number? Or could that be significant for us?
Yeah, it's not a high number, Trustee Cassioppo, not like it wasn't 5 or even 10 years ago, because less and less folks are going into education over time, as evidenced by our visits to college career fairs versus engineering fairs, which are packed full of grads, and education fairs are not. So I can tell you that percentage is probably, I would not even go as far as 5% of our new hires would be straight out of college. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? We're just starting to throw out ideas and get everybody prepared, because it's going to be a tough haul from April to April 15th. We can't be another $1.9 million deficit and get into the ending fund balance. So there's going to have to be some tough decisions made by this board and by staff. So we're just trying to bring up some ideas before then. Joe?
You know, and Richard, on this topic, I think this consideration is twofold. I think it's good to pursue, you know, to the extent we can afford to do it. But I think what it does is it potentially helps us bring our, you know, our payroll costs down, but it's also in my opinion, it's emotionally helpful for our staff, because if we're not offering this to anybody and we have to, you know, God forbid, reduce staff in a different way, there, you know, that's an issue with our existing staff, you know, because they start thinking, you know, boy, look what's happening, and even if it wasn't me now, maybe I'm next. And so being able to have that ability to reduce that, you know, I think promotes a bit more, you know, positive, I'm struggling for words now, but, you know, a positive impact to the existing staff as opposed to not doing anything. So, you know, in that regard, I'm in favor of at least considering that and seeing what it can do for us.
And I guess my worry is also just that what our experience is, that our schools are at capacity. It's not like we have teachers with small classes and schools missing students. And so, I mean, even if we had to reduce staff, we have a lot of kids we have to meet the needs of. And so, you know, it potentially could be a real tough conversation that we need to have, because the bottom line is these kids, that comes first, and they need teachers. And so I think that, I thank you for starting the process of looking at this stuff, because it's not going to be easy. It's not like we're having an exodus of students and we're trying to reshuffle staff to fill buildings.
If I may, Trustee Walker, to your point, I agree with you in that with regard to staffing, if a special ed teacher decides to take advantage of this incentive, it doesn't really help our bottom line. We still need to hire a special ed teacher, right? Science teachers, you know, the hard to fill positions, if they are vacated, I still need to hire them. If I get somebody brand new and maybe a little bit less expensive, great, but it's you know, it's a roll of the dice. Exactly, and good thing we're in Nevada, right? But it's hard to say if we're gonna hit that bottom line, because as you have noticed, our schools are not empty. And we had discussed this team in that it's not like when we were doing the big exodus many years ago. It doesn't feel like that. You know, you're seeing a lot of construction. The bank saloon was on the news yesterday, and, you know, it's big rah-rah of building, and yet we're still talking about this attrition as a merciful way of dealing with reducing staff. And it is, but it's still no fun either way. So I agree with you, Trustee Cassiopo. It's a little bit more humane, but it's still right.
And it's hard for us to explain to the public with a booming economy that we have to cut positions.
Yeah,
And
the
that we-
funding is staying
The
flat.
funding is flat, and that we're not getting enough, we weren't getting enough before, and now with this booming thing, we're still not getting enough. And I don't
But
know
we're getting more
how
kids.
we as a board get that through to the public and to the legislators that, you know, $66 million today is not 3-4 years. The electrical company's not gonna stay flat. The water's not gonna stay flat. Our taxes aren't gonna stay flat.
Teachers' pay doesn't stay
Gasoline,
flat.
yeah, that's the only thing that'll stay flat. But, so, you know, it's gonna be a tough year, but I think staff's been preparing for it and known that it's coming, and discussing a lot with staff and teachers and classified, so, and certified. So I think it's gonna be tough, but I think I wouldn't wanna do it with any other group than we have here.
Well, and I think the pressure's on AJ. It's all on AJ's shoulders. So beyond AJ, I think that really, as we go into an election year, we really, as educators and as advocates for education, we need to really look at those candidates. We need to educate the public, and we need to make sure that they realize, you know, the perception isn't that education is underfunded. I think people say things, but I don't think they understand exactly how underfunded we really are. And the importance of the work the legislature started the last time, and that even though they started something, it wasn't really what we needed. And hopefully it's going to be a step in the right direction, but we need to make sure this next legislature that they start to address some of these things. And I think that we do that through NASB. Rich works with the Superintendent's Association. We have great people in great positions to do that. We have AG on the commission, we have Rich, we have Laurel as the vice president of NASB. So, I mean, I think that it's just working together to really advocate for changes that we need, because it could really be devastating for our district.
Madam President, members of the board, just in parting, I do want to say that we're very blessed. We have been in good financial shape for a lot of years and through the toughest of financial times, and that's attributed to your leadership as well. So after the start of the new year, we'll be having more of these discussions. We still have a healthy ending fund balance. We are taking our direction from you. It seems that the smart thing to do at this point is to get as close as we can to a balanced budget, but also be aware of the fact that we still do have a little bit of a cushion there. So there's a lot of things that could come and go as we get closer to April 15th, but we'll certainly bring that information back here for your guidance and direction and feedback.
And just one more comment with the voluntary separation incentive plan. We could put parameters on it to make sure that hard to fill positions are not able to, because that obviously wouldn't benefit us.
And thank you. That's a great point. In fact, during the last voluntary separation process that we did, we actually held in reserve the ability to say yes or no. And we knew that, as Dr. Delphin mentioned, if a person with a certain license type left, we would likely have to replace that position anyway. And so it just didn't make sense in some cases to accept those. And you're right, we are kind of in control of what those parameters look like. But at the same time, if we're going to do something like that, you also want to be as consistent as you can. So we'll make every effort to make it a fair process.
I just have one more comment on the staff involvement. I don't know if you're talking about just administrative staff that you've dealt with so far, but as we get further in the process, you may want to go down to certified and classified to get their input also.
And maybe one more thing. You're likely to see a press release in the next couple of days through my office seeking applicants or interested parties to put in an application for our support staff. We still, from the start of the school year, don't have a full number of custodians. We just barely, I think, as of Monday, I was told by the Director of Transportation that we do have finally all the bus drivers that we need. But those things turn over so quickly that we are seeking additional staff members. So the difference between kind of what we're talking about here in terms of preparing staff and budgeting for staff in future years is different than just trying to fill the vacancies or the positions that we budget for every year that we need to operate on. So, people might look at that and go, gosh, you're talking on one hand of reducing staff, and on the other hand, you're trying to employ staff. And there's a concerted difference between those two things that we need really to operate our schools.
Well, you definitely need the staff to operate.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Moving
Good
on
luck,
to number
AJ.
7. Moving on to number 17, approval of consent agenda for possible action.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Joe. Any comment? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those approve? All those opposed, motion passes. Moving on to 18, informational items. Lots of holiday stuff going. I have to say, we're talking about budgets, but it's so nice to have the arts and music in our schools, as we saw today. Moving on to 19, requests for future agenda topics. Everybody is ready for holiday break. Woo-hoo! Seeing none, I move that we adjourn. Everybody have a safe and happy holiday, and we will see you back here in January.